Hey friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Emily and I make 2 videos a week, one about books and one about beauty. So today we're going to be doing my November reading wrap up, and I read I think 7 really great books in November. It's been a really good reading month for me, and it's been a mix of physical books, audiobooks, and books on my Kindle. So let's go ahead and chat about it.
Honey?
Alright, so I started November out with a middle grade book, and I read it in one sitting, and that is Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes. And this book made me cry. It was really powerful to read. It is about a 12-year-old black boy named Jerome who is shot by the police. And it is narrated by him in kind of shifting perspectives from before he died and after he died, from the afterlife. So he's looking in on his family and on the trial of the police officer, and in the afterlife he meets other ghost boys, so other black boys who have been wrongfully and horribly killed, like Trayvon Martin and Emmett Till and Tamir Rice. And so this book was, like I said, it made me cry. It was really powerful, and I think if I taught middle school, I would absolutely love to read this book with my students, but it is a bit too high concept for my 4th graders, just like literary wise. But oh my goodness, it just, I can't even put into words how this book made me feel. I highly recommend this to anyone. So the next book I finished was an audiobook. It was called Don't Look for Me by Wendy Walker, and this was a great thriller. And this was about a woman named Molly Clark, and it was the anniversary of her youngest daughter's death, and she played a role in that death. It was an accident, but it was an accident where she was at fault, if that makes sense. She hit her daughter with a car and ended up killing her, but obviously it wasn't on purpose. Anyways, she's clearly very broken up about it. She's really having trouble connecting with her husband and with her 2 children who are still alive, and she's kind of thinking about leaving it all behind and walking away. And that is what everybody thinks has happened when her car turns up and they find a note in a local hotel where she says, you know, she's just needs to start over, it's leaving it all behind. But her oldest daughter, Nick, decides she doesn't believe it. That doesn't seem like something her mom would do, and she decides to investigate on her own. And I can't really say more than that because I would give things away, but it's told alternating through Molly and Nick's perspectives, and it was honestly like so good. I hadn't really heard about it, and sometimes I'm hesitant to pick up thrillers that I haven't really heard about because I tend to hear about the really popular ones, the really good ones. But this one, I'm so glad that I grabbed this audiobook. So I'm sorry if you can hear a lot of noise. It's raining pretty hard, but you know, that's nature, that's life. So the next book that I finished was another thriller on audio, and that was Perfect Little Children by Sophie Hannah. And this book, again, I just picked it up based off the premise, and it was available, and I've never heard anybody talk about it, but I thought it was really good. So this book starts off with the protagonist, Beth, is kind of sneakily checking out her former best friend's house. And she just, like, they had some sort of falling out that's unspecified. It's unspecified for a long time. You don't really find out what was going on. And she just wants to see what's going on with her friend's life. And she's like sitting outside the house, and then her friend drives up, gets out of the car, and she gets out of the car with 2 little kids who look exactly like the little kids that Beth knew 12 years ago. They look the same, and she calls them Thomas and Emily, which were those kids' names. So of course Beth is thinking, like, she must be going crazy. How could she have had children that didn't age? What is going on? And she gets really invested and starts, you know, trying to sneak around and figure out what's happening. And the more she investigates, the more she's sure she's not going crazy. There's something really sinister going on. So this book I could not put down. It was so compelling. And then I got to the climax, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna hate the way this book ends. There's kind of like a cartoonish villain monologue, and I was like, oh, really? It was so good up until this point. And then I ended up actually, the author totally saved it with the real ending. So that was like the climactic point, like a couple chapters before the ending. And then the way she actually wrapped it up, I really did enjoy. But it missed being a 5-star read for me just because of that big confrontation, and it got a little bit unbelievable. I mean, not that any of it was that believable, but it just like, I feel like pushed a little too far, but then the way she ended up wrapping up the whole story ended up being amazing. So next up was a book I read on my Kindle, and I read this one for a book club that I participate in, and that was Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. And this one, I've only ever read one other book by Lisa Jewell, and that was The Family Upstairs, and I felt kind of the same way about that one as I did about Invisible Girl. It just was like, there was so much I wanted to like, I just wasn't quite there. It didn't hit exactly right for me. So Invisible Girl is about a girl named Sapphire, and she has gone through some trauma as a young kid, and she's a teenager now and has a therapist that she gets kind of invested in his personal life, and then she ends up going missing. So the whole time you're trying to figure out what exactly happens to Sapphire. Like, was she murdered? Was she kidnapped? Did she run away? It's very unclear. Did her therapist, who she's been kind of stalking, have anything to do with it? It's also narrated by the therapist's wife, and her son gets to know Sapphire, and there's also this kind of creepy guy who's really involved in like online incel forums, who's a character who it's just the whole time is very unclear. But my problem with this book was that I felt like a lot of this was over the top misdirection to confuse the reader on purpose. And I feel like that's a fine line in a lot of thrillers where you want there to be a plot twist. You want it to be shocking and surprising, and you want it to be, confused about who the perpetrator of whatever the crime is. But I do feel like sometimes authors tend to cross over into the point where they're just like dropping crazy clues that don't make any sense to confuse the reader on purpose. And at that point you're just kind of like, but like, why did you bring up that plot point? The whole incel focus in this book I felt was a little bit, I don't know. A lot of it wasn't quite there for me. So I don't know if I would really recommend this one, but I did have a really interesting discussion with my book club, and I think this upcoming weekend we're going to get to talk to Lisa Jewell. So some of my opinions might change once I hear from the author about how, why she made some of the choices that she made, but overall this just wasn't it for me. And I've heard some amazing reviews of Lisa Jewell books, but the two that I've read just, they just didn't hit that threshold of great thrillers that I really love. So I don't know, I'm open to trying more, but I think if I read another book of hers that's like this, I might not pick up any more of her books, because it just, I don't know, something just wasn't there for me. All right, next up is Echoes of a Haunting by Clara Miller, and this book purports to be nonfiction. I'm skeptical about a lot of it, but it is a kind of like a memoir of this woman and her family's time living in a haunted house. And it was super spooky. It was really interesting. But again, personally, my personal beliefs, I mean, if somebody told me a house was haunted and like scary stuff was happening there, I wouldn't move in. But I also don't know how much I believe in ghosts, spirits, all of that kind of stuff. I feel like I'm on the skeptical side where I'm like, it's better safe than sorry, but also I don't know if everything you wrote in here is true. You know what I mean? So it was super interesting to read. And I actually heard about the book from one of my favorite true crime YouTubers, Stephanie Harlow. She has a thing called Halloween in the month of October where she makes like still true crime videos, but also more like supernatural ghost story kind of creepy videos. So she did a 2-part series on the Hinsdale house where Clara Miller and her family lived. So I will link her videos down below. And I think you could just watch Stephanie's videos and be fine without reading the book, but the book was where she got a lot of her information to tell the story. And honestly, I kind of liked Stephanie's storytelling of it a little bit better, but I just like her, and that's why I subscribe to her anyways, because I like the way she tells stories. But it was really cool to read the source material, and it gave me a lot of interesting stuff to think about. If you have read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, this book really reminded me of the dad's book that ended up in that story being fictional, but his book that he published as nonfiction. It was very similar, and I actually wonder if Riley Sager was inspired by Echoes of a Haunting at all when he was writing Home Before Dark. All right, we are almost done, and the last audiobook that I finished this month was You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Peckman. I think I said it right? Sarah Pekkanen, I think. And this book was recommended to me by my friend Jessie, and I am so glad she recommended it because I had heard some people talking about it, but I wasn't really sure based on the reviews and everything and based on the synopsis. But I feel like a book recommendation from somebody you've shared recommendations with in the past and you know that you have enjoyed similar books is really powerful, and that's a really great way for me to start reading a book, you know, because sometimes books get really overhyped on like Bookstagram and BookTube and, you know, the online book community. But hearing from a friend like, hey, I listened to this audiobook and it was really good, I was like, okay, I'll put a hold on that at my library, I'll pick it up. And she was so right. It was so good. It has such a wide cast of amazing female characters, and it is about a woman named Shay who sees another woman complete suicide by jumping in front of a subway. And obviously this has a major and pretty negative impact on her life, and it turns out she was so in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she gets wrapped up in something a lot more sinister than she even thought was possible. So it was a super great book, very thrilling, a very thrilling thriller. Wow, Emily, great commentary there. But honestly, it was great, and I definitely would recommend picking up the audiobook. So on my TikTok, which I'm now going to start linking below because I have that now, I have been doing a series of makeup looks inspired by book characters, kind of blending my two passions. Well, I've got more than two passions, but you know, those are like two of the big ones. That's what I make videos about. But I loved the cast of women in this book so much that I'm doing a series of a series within a series of makeup looks inspired by the women in this book. Today's look is Cassandra Moore. Went for pretty glam, put together, you know, impressive, intimidating, powerful businesswoman kind of look. So here we go. But you know, you can follow my TikTok if you want to see the looks inspired by the other women in this book. But yeah, that audiobook was super great, and I would really recommend it. Last up is another book that I started for my book club, and I haven't finished it yet, but I'm planning on hopefully finishing it today, so I'm still including it in this video. It is the last day of November, and that is Disability Visibility, which was edited by Alice Wong. And this book, I'm like about almost halfway through, but I already think that everybody should read this book. This is so powerful, so incredible. And like I said, I'm reading this, started reading this for my book club, but my friend Lane also recommended it, and I take her recommendations very seriously as well, so I knew it was going to be good because Lane recommended it. But this book is absolutely incredible. It is a collection of essays written by disabled people about their experiences, and it really does such an incredible job of covering a whole spectrum of intersectionality. There are LGBTQ disabled people, there are trans disabled people, more specifically, there are people of color who are disabled, Black, Indigenous people, there are people disabled in a variety of ways, intellectual, physical disabilities. One of the essays that I read yesterday, which was incredibly powerful, was written by somebody who was incarcerated and was deaf, and about, you know, all of the rights that they had taken away because they were incarcerated, which, by the way, it was for a parole violation, which, you know, not that we're gonna get too into politics on here, but I personally feel it's pretty messed up to throw somebody in jail and take away like all their rights for something minor like that. But anyways, and it was about, they were incarcerated because of a parole violation and could not communicate with anyone. The prison just absolutely refused to provide ASL interpreters. They would house this person with a blind inmate, so they could not communicate at all. So this person was completely deprived of human interaction, which we know is essential for, you know, life and not losing your mind. So that one has really stuck with me. But there have been so many essays in here, and I, like I said, I'm not even halfway through. This is an incredibly powerful book, and I'm kind of taking it a little bit slower than I normally read, just because I want to make sure I'm giving each essay the attention that it deserves. But even though I have not finished this, I know it's already going to be a 5-star book, and I really do truly believe everyone should read this. Alright, so those were all of the amazing books that I have read in the month of November, and I would absolutely love it if you could leave a comment down below and let me know the best book that you read in November. Like I mentioned a couple times in this video, I take recommendations from friends really seriously, and if you subscribe to me on YouTube, I consider you a friend. So please, please, please let me know, what book should I read? What book did you read that you love? Have you read any of these? Just leave a comment, let me know. Please don't forget to subscribe before you go, and if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you click that bell icon to turn on notifications and turn it on to all instead of personalized, because I've heard that that is the best way to make sure you get notified of all my new videos. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.